Hello, this is John Storm again with part two of my commentary on the Book of Enoch. Again, this is only doing some highlights of the book. The whole book does not exist anymore either way, or at least where we can get our hands on it. But let's get on with part two here. Now, we left off in part one where we were talking about the part where it says, "And the women brought forth giants, whose stature was each 300 cubits. These devoured all which the labor of men produced, until it became impossible to feed them." So you can imagine the size. 300 cubits is going to be anywhere from 450 to 600 feet tall, depending on whether we're talking about a regular cubit or a royal cubit. In the process of this, let's go on to my slide 4. This is of chapter 7, verse 13. "And they turned themselves against men in order to devour them. And they began to injure birds, beasts, reptiles, fish, to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood." Notation, number 8, their flesh one after another, or one another's flesh. R.H. Charles notes that this phrase may refer to the destruction of one class of giants by another. Charles, page 65. There's notations we discussed in the previous part that some of the remaining interpretations of the Book of Enoch hold several classes of giants, which also very much describes like the battle between the gods and the titans in the Greek mythos there. Verse 15, "Then the earth reproved the unrighteous. Moreover, Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates, parentheses, warcraft. He taught them war." Men were already having fights between one another. If you're taking the Genesis account, you'll find that Cain basically picked up a rock and slew Abel. This was very basic. We're going to kill each other. Well, Azazel taught them how to kill each other more efficiently and effectively. So many people object to the modern day invention of the handgun and people owning handguns, or even people owning swords for that matter. New York State's really nasty about what you can own and what you can't own, and all of their laws or statutes concerning such are actually totally illegal, but that's not what we're discussing here. The idea is that a sword, like a handgun, this is the relevance here, is only made to do one thing. It is not made for bringing in crops. They're not made for hunting game. They're made to kill people, and to kill people well, and to kill people efficiently. That's what they both have in common. It's what they're designed for. Now, does this make the invention itself evil? No, men are going to use whatever they got. Before they invented the swords and the handguns, they used rock sticks or whatever, bare hands, whatever came to hand. All right, so we got chapter 8, verse 1, "Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, breastplates, and things to defend themselves with. The fabrication of mirrors, polishing metal to make mirrors so you could look at yourself and you could adjust your image. Today's warlock elite, and believe me, it is a craft. In spellcraft, there is a section of spellcraft called glamours, Glamours, and it is not any different than what you have today for glamour. It's just you think of today's glamour as differently. A glamour is a spell, and the spell being a period of time where a certain influence or influences are brought to bear to accomplish a desired goal. In the case of a glamour, the spell or the purpose of the spell is to make something look to be more valuable and precious than it is. The old adage, all that glitters isn't gold. But today's Madison Avenue and commercial giants want you to believe image is everything. And you don't know what your image is unless you're going to look into a pool or something. So they invented mirrors. Mirrors allowed you to adjust your image so that how you reflected on other people, how other people see you, you could see yourself and determine how other people would see you. And you could adjust that image to get the best effect. Now, what effect that would be, that's entirely up to you. Like I say, spellcraft, kind of like the invention of swords and guns, is not necessarily evil. How you use it is evil. You can say the sword and the gun are evil because they were designed to kill people. But sometimes, maybe not in all of your lives out there, but some of you have experienced times when it was necessary to kill people or to be killed or to see many innocents killed because people were evil. And the only way to stop them, hey, you could ask them as nice as you want, but that's not going to stop them. Sometimes you have to make them stop. And that requires a little exercising on their mortality. All right. So we got the fabrication of mirrors and the workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, metallurgy. These also make you look prettier, make you more attractive to the eye. Bracelets and ornaments also create, besides glamours, the spell of fascination. The ability with something shiny, something interesting to draw the eye and hold the attention. Now, what do you want to hold the attention for? Well, that's entirely up to you. All right. And in this case, these people, these particular witches, these women that these watchers were cohabiting with, could have any man they wanted because they knew how to seduce them, how to get their attention and to use it for their own purposes. Okay. And that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you meet a gal and she draws your attention and she gets your eye and it's the best thing that ever happened to you. See, so I'm not making a judgment one way or another whether this in itself is good or evil. I am and always have been a witch. I was brought up in this craft. I believe a lot about what the Bible says and stuff about Jesus and about a lot of this other stuff. I don't believe absolutely all of it, or I don't believe it in the context that many institutionalized religionists like to believe it in. So thus I'm sharing my rather unique perspective in my commentary here. All right. Let's see. The workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, still verse 1 of chapter 8. The use of paint. Oh, isn't that interesting? The beautifying of the eyebrows. Is it her or is it Maybelline? The use of stones of every valuable and select kind, and all sorts of dyes, so that the world became altered. I make a note there in parentheses, also known as glamours, in the making and usage of such things. We can take a plain Jane and make her very attractive with the use of paints, beautifying of the eyebrows, ornaments, bracelets, the whole likes. What girl in America especially doesn't know this? All right? Kind of gets handed down from mother to daughter, and I'm telling you, my craft has been around for eons before Christianity or Judaism was even invented. Okay, long before Abraham ever left Ur of the Chaldees. All right, this is no new news to any of us that have been in this. I probably have more in common with the first century Gentiles, pagans, that believed in Christ. They were still Gentile believers, pagan believers that understood some things that a lot of other pagans didn't. That was the only designation between them and their pagan brethren and ancestors that they came from. Okay, I jumped to the New Testament, but okay, let's go on. Chapter 8, verse 2. Impiety increased, fornication multiplied. All these women learned all this fancy stuff, how to seduce and get men to pay more attention to them. This gave them power. This gave them power to manipulate men in any way they chose. A man, I don't care how strong he is, and I don't care what object, how strong, heavy, or massive it is, becomes easy to manipulate when it's put off balance. The same with men. No doubt you've seen, pretty little thing take and lead the biggest brute around, practically by her little finger. There is a craft to this. And it is no new news to me. I was trained by my grandmother and my aunts, and the women in our family were, well, not all of them, but most of them were very well trained and brought up in the craft, even as I was. Okay, so impiety increased. Um, Impiety is basically we don't give a flying hoop-de-doo what God or the Creator thinks or what's the natural order of things. We're going to do pretty much what we want. In the Old Testament, I can't remember if it was in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, Solomon, probably the greatest witch in recorded history, wrote or maybe it was in Psalms. I can't remember. He says rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Now, witchcraft by itself is the craft of the wise. I don't believe that in itself is a sin. The part that makes it more conducive to making mistakes and going against the nature of things is what you see in that chapter, that little verse before there, where these women were using this stuff. They learned this stuff. In itself, it wasn't bad, but how they used it was bad. They broke the natural order of things. There was a certain hierarchy or whatever it is, and they took it and they changed it to their own. When you're a witch, people think, well, most muggles, Cowan is the proper word, in our language, but I like J.K. Rowling's word muggles. Most muggles think, they go through life and they're victims of circumstance. This happened. You don't understand. That happened. I'm a victim of circumstance. Shit happens and I'm subject to all of it. Well, to the witch, to the wizard, it is not the same. We are the master of our circumstances. A witch or a wizard doesn't just simply shrug a shoulder and say, shit happens. What could I do? No, a witch or a wizard is a person who says, I have the power to make shit happen. And this is precisely what they do. Now, this is where they can rebel against God. God says, no, hey, I'm going to have it anyway. God says, this is the natural order of things where I want you to be in your life and how I want you to operate within your circles. And you just take that all away and say, I'm going to do it my way. I don't care what your way. See, these watchers, these fallen angels, started that and brought that down and then gave that to these women and these men. This is how you can kill people faster, quicker, more efficiently, and take everything they got. It's like the beginning history of white men, You come to America, what did they do? They killed people quickly and efficiently. They gave them blankets with smallpox. If the muskets and stuff wasn't enough firepower, and the cans, the blankets with smallpox, and every little crafty thing they could come up to kill people and take away their property and things that they wanted for themselves. Some of my Native American and black friends would say, this is so. And they would not necessarily be wrong. Not that their cultures hadn't had any of this also, but white people, I can say this for my own, seem to really prevail with this sort of thinking. So there, verse 2, their impiety increased, fornication multiplied. Gee, that's no surprise. And they transgressed and corrupted all their ways. This is precisely what I was saying. In parentheses here, my note, people used all of this new technology to fulfill their every desire upon each other. The technology in itself was neutral. Any good thing could have been done with it, and has been, over the ages. But also, people making their own choices. Life is about choices. Chose. This is something that occurs from the inside, your conscious awareness. Your soul, the person who you are on the inside when you woke up, is not the flesh that you are. You don't have a soul. You are a soul. And from the soul, from the inside outward, you manifest what's in you. In this case, these people were manifesting evil things, using everything around them to take their every desire. Some people desire not to hurt people. Some people desire to help people. Some people desire to be a force for good in their community. And it is a strong, heartfelt desire from the inside out. It doesn't mean we always succeed. We make mistakes. That's what sin is. Sin is a Greek archery term in the New Testament. It's also in the Old Testament, but the word in the New Testament is actually an archery term for missing the mark. We aim for it, we want to hit the bullseye, but we missed it. All right, these people missed it. They weren't even shooting at the target. They were shooting at everybody else's targets. And said, well, forget this. I don't want this. I don't want to excel at this. I don't want to be the best archer. I just want to be the most popular, richest, and most powerful person around. And that's what they manifested out of what they learned. Okay, let's go down to verse 3. Amazarach taught all the sorcerers and dividers of roots. Now, here's an interesting craft that, in my parentheses here, users of potions and pharmaceuticals. I explained a bit about that in part 1, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. Armors taught the solution of sorcery, also known as the uses of drugs and potions as medicine. The solution of sorcery is what particular medicinal roots, herbs, extracts, and such will solve this problem, this discomfort, this disorder, which one will do what. One is learning that, hey, this can be used for this, that, or the other thing. This is how you make extract of vanilla. This is how you make peppermint oil. This is how you make valerian. And Armors taught them, okay, now you can take this valerian, mix it with a little chamomile, and you got a nice little tea, a nice little potion to help you sleep at night. This is a solution. This is how to use all these things. We'll get further into this as we go here. I got to find my computer. Okay, and now to my slide 5. This is still chapter 8. This is verse 5. Barkael taught the observers of the stars. There's a notation here by Charles. Observers of the stars, astrologers. They observe the effects that stars and certain astral entities have upon people. Akibiel taught signs. Now here's an interesting thing. I've got a notation, AK indicators. Things or signs that indicate other things happening unseen. This is the science of omens, signs. These are indicators. People like to always put an occult thing. Occult means hidden. And indeed it is a cult, but it's not necessarily demonic or anything of that nature. Religion has taken and twisted a lot of this stuff out of its context, where people become very ignorant to the fullness. You know, it's like you're wearing blinders. You only see this one small, narrow definition of a thing. You don't understand what it is in its fullness, or even what its effect might be on you and everyone around you. You say, oh, stay away from it. But you can't. It's all around you, and you're subject to it. Like Jesus said in the New Testament, I send you out among wolves. You know, the world isn't a nice little Christian place or Jewish place or Muslim place. Therefore, be wise as serpents. Wise in Gaelic is wicha, the word you get witch, wizard, wisdom from. All right? Be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. Often the Wiccans, as the Wiccans might say, do as you will, but harm none. You know, another more famous saying these days is do no harm and take no shit. All right? Okay, so Akibiel taught signs, indicators. When you see these little things that look like little tiny red warts show up, that is an indication that you have chicken pox. When you hear a wet cough, it is an indicator that you have an upper respiratory infection. Can you see the infection? Do you have x-ray eyes? No. But this thing here is an indicator that this is what's going on. A fever is an indicator that your body is fighting off something and it's raised its temperature. These are what signs and omens are. Portents. They are indicators. It is not always something mystical, but it may be mystical if you're that flippin' ignorant, but that's the truth of the matter I'm sharing with you. All right. Tamiel, verse 7, taught astronomy. It's the knowledge of the stars, the moon, and astrology kind of tells the effect that certain of these influences tend to have on people during these certain periods of time. Again, we're talking spellcraft. He's teaching witches. Okay, this is where in my craft the original 200 weirding clans came from. These particular families is what I've been saying. The 13 elite Illuminist clans are only 13 of those 200. There's 187 more clans that each went their own way and didn't necessarily, some of these got wiped out, but I don't believe they're entirely wiped out. Just kind of got separated from their roots, as I believe with most of you. Oftentimes in some of and I encourage you to get onto my YouTube channel, either Witchman53 or Stormm53, where you're hearing this now, and and look up some of my other lectures on weirding clans, who they are, what's the signs or indicators that you have those particular genetic markers, and reclaim your power. I teach a lot on this particular subject. Okay, so we got verse 7, Tamiel taught astronomy. Verse 8, and Saradel taught the motion of the moon, also known as lunar effects upon tides, winds, and aspects of nature. All of these things operate in cycle. All the ecosystem and the biology on this earth also operates under the influences of the moon. The Dianic witches and all that, we're very, very aware of this. This here would be the basic roots of your more Dianic sects of witches. And men being destroyed, just completely torn apart by this. If it wasn't the Warcraft, it was the women leading them around by their Johnson. I'm trying to keep this somewhat PG rated here, but you know what I'm talking about. If you've been around a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about, all of this. And so did they. Enoch was no stranger to any of this. And the men being destroyed, it's verse 9, cried out, and their voice reached to heaven. In parentheses, the effects of the wars, the murders, and the craft being used against them, as they were defenseless against such powers, as used and abused. They didn't know what to do. This stuff was all brand new. There was no defense. As a matter of fact, many men to this day will hey, it's women. I'm only a man. I'm only human. And, it's kind of like, okay, this perfect slut comes along, and just because she's made up a certain way, he can't resist her. And the fact is, if he really tried hard or really wanted to, he could resist her. But more often than not, we're taken kind of unawares in this. I'm not going to blame it all on the women. We have our choices, and sometimes we choose to be an idiot. And what happens is because we chose an idiot's path. Not all that glitters is gold. Not every, I think there was a song back in the 70s, was it Robert Plant, got a bad case of loving you. A pretty face don't make a pretty heart, and that's what I learned right from the start. Pretty face can run you all over the place, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a pretty soul involved with it. I know I've been married 3 times, and all of my wives were very pretty. I won't say, on a deeper look, maybe a little broken in a number of ways. But you tend to overlook those things, and that's not always a bad thing either. But somehow how you allow it to get used by it or get obsessed by it also often has nothing but adverse effects on yourself and the relationship as a whole. And this is a result of what happened in these early things, what these people brought with them. All right. Now we're gonna jump up about a couple chapters to chapter 10. That was chapter 8, where we were talking about the men being destroyed and cried out, and their voices reached to heaven. And there's a lot of stuff for parts missing, and like I say, I'm only going through the highlights. This is the Creator's response to this interference from chapter 10. Verse 10, restore the earth, which the angels have corrupted, and announce life to it, that I may revive it. This is the Creator's response. He wants to bring the earth back. He wants to tear what's there down and restore it from scratch. All right. Now, this is several generations before Noah and the ark and the flood. Okay. Noah was Enoch's great-grandson. Okay. And we'll be hearing from him later on in this study, incidentally, because they have the Book of Noah, books of Noah kind of mixed in with the books of Enoch, but they're all kind of relevant in their own way. Like I say, I'm just going through the highlights and some interesting things which you probably didn't know. Some are more relevant than others. Some are just flipping interesting. That's all. All right. Verse 11. All the sons of men shall not perish in consequence of every secret by which the watchers have destroyed and which they have taught their offspring. See, this knowledge kind of got handed down from father, husband to wife, mother to daughter, father to son, and people share the craft. Hey, this is how I got this power. Now, there's an interesting crest or symbol. This is a side note about certain images and icons that tell people where they get their power from. And there's one that everybody, you'll find it on your dollar bill. It's this pyramid with this all-seeing eye on top. And why is it just one eye and not two? Well, there's a saying that is an old proverb, and it's a very ancient proverb. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And many rulers have shared this with their sons and their daughters and the generations which were to succeed them. This is how I gained power. I became the authority because I limited their knowledge of what things are and how they work. We obscured it in mysticism and occult practices and strange rites so that people would think, well, this is what you mean and not that. And yet they get ruled by it every day. The minute you turn on the television, you are subject to the craft. Whether you see a witch in a black robe and a green face and warts on it and a broom or any of that or not, you are still being subjected to witchcraft. When you see big pharma working, take this pill, ask your doctor about such and such, and it'll make you happy. It won't tell you what the pill does, but they will tell you what the side effects are, which will scare the hell out of you if you're listening. But nobody's ever listening because they're told this drug will bring them happiness. It'll make them more attractive to the opposite sex. We're seeing all the same lust being played upon people, and people are sucking it up and jumping to it without realizing what the craft is that they're grabbing at. Okay, so we go back to verse, that was verse 11. Verse 12. All the earth has been corrupted by the effects of the teaching of Azazel. To him, therefore, ascribe the whole crime. The effects of the advanced technology, now you may not think that much, but it changed the world, was the sole fault of extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional creatures. Now this Azazel and some of these others, the effects of the whole crime. In other words, when you today gone and married that slut, or let's say this guy. Now, this is not strictly on the women now. Guys use things too. We're going to have those rock hard abs. We're going to have that certain haircut. We're going to have that certain smell and that clean shave and all this other kind of stuff. We're going to make clothes and wear clothes that accents certain aspects of our physical being, kind of shows us off in the best light. We all use the craft. And, you were taken by this silver-tongued man that just made your life miserable, or that gorgeous woman that just completely wrecked your life and turned it upside down. But I also add that was your stupid choice. But the fact that this guy gave these people these things, he's not just responsible. The Creator's not just holding him responsible for what happened then. He's ascribing the whole crime. This got taught from father to son, mother to daughter for generations upon generations, even now. So this person, this particular spirit or watcher or mortal creature, is being held to this day and until the end of what we call time for this crime. The whole ball of wax that happened, that kind of got started from his planting, and you got to admit, this is right, this is righteous, this is fair. He did this. He's responsible for this. He brought this about, so therefore ascribe to him the whole crime. And we'll call it an end for this particular slide. And if I really want to keep these all about a half hour under, I should end part 2 at about this point, and we'll pick up next time with my Enoch commentary part 3. Thank you very much for listening.